Welcome to Truck Tech, where today my videographer Eric and I have hit the road for a purpose. It's a really exciting time of year for us at Truck Tech because it's time to go shopping for a new project vehicle. Now, the possibilities are really endless. There's a lot of different ways that we have built trucks in the past. Everything from lifted to lowered, two-wheel drive to four-wheel drive, street trucks, and even race trucks. So, the question is, what are we gonna buy this time? We're really gonna kind of put the spin on it of like my first truck. Maybe you're a high schooler, you don't have a lot of money to put together, and you want sort of a classic truck that can be sporty, that can be fun, or it can have some utility. So I did some looking online, and I have one that I've picked out that I think is gonna fit the bill. Well, hello, beautiful. How's it going, Victor?
Hey, doing good, LT. How you doing?
Doing very well. I hope this is the truck, because that one looks beautiful.
It is, sir. Here's the keys. Check it out, see how you like it.
Thank you. This is a 1988 Chevy K1500, part of the GMT 400 platform that Chevrolet and GM made from 1988 to 1998 in pickups and until 2000 with Suburbans and 3500s. Right now, this is probably one of the most popular body style of trucks that you can find just behind the square body Chevy. And we've built a ton of those recently, so it's time to mix things up a little bit. Also, for me, this is kind of a little bit of a nostalgic truck because when I was a kid, this is what I saw on TV on the commercials with that Bob Seger song playing, Like a Rock, you know, with the truck bouncing over the ruts and through the mud. This is just the classic American pickup, and we're gonna take it home. There are a few different engine options that you could have got when you bought this truck brand new. The 4.3 V6, the 305 V8, and this, the 350 5.7 liter. Now this one is injected with a TBI. I think they were about 190 horsepower when they were brand new, and this truck looks to be about as all original as it can get. A lot of guys will swap out the air cleaners, throw headers on, some guys will even convert them to carburetors, but this truck is a time capsule, about as stock as they come, and definitely a good place for us to start. Now, with a truck that's almost 30 years old, rust is always a concern when you're looking for a project vehicle, even on one that looks as nice as this, because paint can hide a lot of stuff. So the first thing that I always do is take my fingers and carefully run them along the back side of the inner wheel well. Now this will do two things. Number one, it lets me feel if there are any rust holes, or it lets me feel if there are any weld seams from previous rust repairs. This one checks out, it's actually really solid on the back side. The next place that these trucks rust out a lot are the cab corners. Now, it's really easy to fill something over, paint it, and kind of hide it, but you could easily take your thumb, kind of press in and feel a soft spot. This truck, again, really solid. So if it has been repaired, it's been repaired properly, but because there are no weld seams, I can tell that it's been done right and there was no rust in the first place. The last place is underneath the doors. You always want to open up the doors and check out the seam on the bottom. There are drain holes both front and rear that often get plugged up with dirt and debris, especially if you park underneath a tree. The doors will fill up with water, and as we all know, water causes rust. So the bottoms of these doors often will be blistered out and just caked with rust. This one, again, real solid, but those are three areas that I always check for rust when looking at an old truck. Now there is one problem that all these old Chevys have almost without exception. Now check it out. If you follow this style line down the door, it seems to line up, but as soon as you open the door just a little bit, it clearly drops down, and that has to do with the door hinge. There's a small bushing in the front that wears out, and it's a dead giveaway because you can rattle the door up and down and you can feel and see that play. It's an inexpensive fix and certainly not a deal killer, but just something to look out for. Anytime you put oversized tires on a truck with independent front suspension, the front end can take a beating. So there's a couple things that you can look out for to see if things are worn out. The first dead giveaway are the tires. Now these are brand new, but if the front end were worn, you'd have uneven tread wear on the outside shoulders of the tire. The second thing that I look for are ball joints. Now, this truck has a new upper control arm as part of the leveling kit, but it has a stock lower control arm. A dead giveaway here, the lower ball joints are actually bolted to the control arm. The factory ones were riveted in, so we know that they have been replaced at some point in their life. But another telltale sign is the bushings, the boots, everything looks brand new. So I know this front end has recently been gone through. But if you look at all that stuff and you still can't tell if it's been replaced or not, here's another test you can do. Grab the tire and shake the crap out of it. Shake the whole truck back and forth, and just kind of listen for any sort of clunks and have somebody watch for play inside on the ball joint. If it's tight, there won't be any movement. So a couple things you can quick and easily check to tell the health of your front end of your truck. Now I've done my homework on this truck. checked it out, and even talked with the previous owner about its history. And even though it has a clean Carfax, I'll still take it out for a quick test drive just to be sure. You guys have ever owned an old body style Chevy? It brings you back the instant you get in. You hear that sound that the door makes when it shuts, the sound of the starter when the engine turns over. It's just pure nostalgia. Right off the bat, I can tell we got a good one. This thing drives smooth and clean and straight. There's no shaking from the steering wheel. The tires run true. It's a good, solid truck. There's really two different ways we could build a truck like this. The first and the most common is what everybody would probably do. Lift it up a little bit higher, put some bigger wheels and tires on it, 35s, 37s. A lot of guys would say, put a solid axle under the front end, just make a big, bad off-road looking truck. The other way you could do it, well, you could go a little bit lower. If you guys know me, the last thing I want to do is the same thing that everybody else wants to do. I'm not going to give away exactly what this truck's going to look like when it's done, but all I can say is it's going to be different and it's going to be awesome. So y'all will have to stay tuned. All right, little red truck, see what you got. I will say that the independent front suspension on this certainly rides a bit smoother than the K5's solid axle. We are going to keep the IFS intact, but just about every other part of this drivetrain will be upgraded, and you might be surprised at what we have planned.
We came, we saw, we cut a deal, then cut some trails. Now it's time to come up with a plan for Project RedTide. And what LT has in mind just might make you four-wheel drive guys run for the hills.
Today we're going to be kicking off a brand new project, this 1988 Chevy, and we're going to nickname it Project RedTide. It's a K1500, which means it's a half-ton four-wheel drive. I've always had a love affair with the single cab short box truck. They look great, they're agile, and they're just sporty. Now, you'll notice this truck is a little bit dirty, and that's because immediately after we bought it, we took it out on the trail alongside our K5, which we just finished up. We wanted to get a baseline and see how this K1500 would perform. We really wanted to get a better idea of how this truck would handle the rough stuff, and it did pretty well for a mostly stock truck. The suspension soaked up the bumps, and it had no problem tackling the mild mud holes that we pointed it at. All in, it was a fun trail machine, but there's always room for improvement. So the question is, what are we going to change first on the truck, and exactly what direction are we going to take with this build as a whole? We could get the suspension up in the air and cut out all the IFS parts. Throw some solid axles underneath on leaf springs, getting the truck another 6 to 8 inches up in the air so we can run a massive 42-inch tall tire, making the K1500 the ultimate off-roader. Our first modification to the suspension is going to require that we remove the bed. The bed is held to the frame with a couple of bolts, and an impact gun makes quick work of them. After that, it's just a few wires for the taillights, the fuel filler neck, and the bed is loose. We're going to move the truck outside and lift off the bed. Luckily, we have a forklift and a bunch of ratchet straps, which make easy work of it. All right, let's see if we can drop something. If you don't happen to have a forklift sitting around, a couple of buddies and a case of beer will do the job. Let's do some washing. It only takes a few minutes, and anytime the bed comes up, it's totally worth the extra effort to clean things up. The truck will look nicer, and your washing machine will thank you.
LT, I heard somebody down here is doing a solid axle swap. And I think a project like that deserves to be down in XOR.
Well, you're right. If I were going to solid axle swap this truck, I'd probably be stepping on your toes. So don't worry, I'm not going to do that. In fact, I'm not even going to lift this truck.
there's no way you're just going to keep it stock.
No, you're right. I'm not going to do that. In fact, we're going in the complete opposite direction. Do you remember the early 90s GMC Cyclones and Typhoons?
Yeah.
So those were actually based on a four-wheel drive S10 chassis that had been lowered down to the ground and converted to all-wheel drive. We're going to replicate that in this full-size K1500. We're going to lower a four-wheel drive truck.
You are going to catch so much flack for doing that.
Well, you know what? That's all right, because I've done it before and I've heard it all. You know what the #1 complaint is? All right. You're gonna ruin that truck by lowering it down to the ground. A four-wheel drive truck belongs lifted in the air with big mud tires on it. Well, here's the facts. We're not gonna ruin anything because the four-wheel drive system is still gonna function perfectly. We're not gonna take anything out. You can still use it as a pickup truck. You can haul a trailer, you can put cargo in the bed. But you know what? I guess the only thing you can't do is go through those, like, what do you guys drive through mud puddles or something down there? You can't do that.
Yeah, but why wouldn't you just start with a two-wheel drive truck?
A two-wheel drive truck, yeah, it would be a lot easier to lower, and everyone does. And that's part of the problem, is I don't want to do what everyone else does. One of the major reasons actually has to do with traction. You know, we want to make this an all-wheel drive, all-weather vehicle. So whether it's snowing or raining, we can still put a fair amount of power down to the ground and not just be spinning out. And if we ever want to go to the drag strip, it'll be much easier to launch it off the line without spinning.
Well, hey, this is not my cup of tea. You really don't have me sold on the whole thing, but I'm assuming it's going to take some parts to pull it off.
Yeah, I got a few laid out. Let me show you what we're going to do.
Right.
It actually only takes a handful of parts, and everything we got here we picked up from Summit Racing. We'll start out in the rear with a flip kit. These brackets are basically going to relocate the rear axle on top of the spring pack for a total of 6 inches of drop. Then we'll have to come in and install a C-notch. This is going to cut out a spot of the frame to allow more axle travel without bottoming out. And the front is even simpler yet. All we have to do is install a pair of torsion bar keys to lower the front 4 inches, and we'll top it all off with a pair of shorter shocks.
Well, you're right. That definitely is simple.
All right, well, let's get to work then. Hey, where are you going?
This is all you, buddy.
Next, RedTide gets laid out.
We're getting ready to lower the rear end of RedTide, our 88 K1500. And the first step is to make some room for the axle. A template is provided with a kit, which shows us where to cut with no measuring or guesswork needed. We have to get the bump stops out of the way first, and a cutoff wheel and air chisel make quick work of the rivets. Then it's just a matter of following the lines to slice the frame. Since the flip kit is going to place the axle so much higher towards the frame, we needed to make the notch so the axle won't bottom out. This is plenty of clearance now, but we can't leave it like this because, well, it's just not strong enough. So we will be installing this reinforcement plate over the frame. You'll notice that the notch isn't centered perfectly over the rear axle. That's because the saddles that the axle will sit in actually locate the axle just a little bit further towards the rear. This is because you won't have to change the length of your drive shaft. Now, you can bolt these in, but I always prefer to weld them in because it's just a little bit stronger. Since we need clean metal to weld to, I'll trace the outline of the reinforcement. Then, I'll use a flap wheel to remove the fresh powder coat on the bracket everywhere I plan to weld. The same process is repeated on the frame, cleaning up years of rust, undercoat, and paint. Then, the bracket is clamped onto the frame. Machine setup is critical to ensure proper weld penetration and strength, so a frame modification like this might not be a welding project for the novice. Because this 1/4 inch thick brace does take some power to burn into the frame, I'm jumping around from side to side to control heat input. All right, we got the frame all tied back together and it's strong as ever. Now, we don't always get to show you guys both sides of an operation like this, but I can't do the flip kit until both notches are in. So I've got a little bit more work to do, but I have a feeling the other side will go just a little bit quicker. For a project like this, a MIG machine is the easiest and quickest method of welding. We could have done it with a TIG, but that takes a ton of time. And if all you have is a stick welder, that'll get the job done just the same. Now that we have some extra room in the frame, we'll start the actual lowering process by first supporting the rear axle on stands. The shocks are the first part to come off, followed by the original U-bolts on both the passenger and driver's side. Now here's something kind of scary that you can find on an older vehicle or one that's a little bit rusted. This rear U-bolt has corroded almost all the way through. And this is a very important fastener that holds the rear axle to the leaf springs. If this were to fail, you'd be in a world of trouble. Now the problem is this lower spring perch kind of acts like a cup. It collects all the dirt and mud and water and just lets it sit right around the U-bolt, causing rust. So if you lived in a rust belt area or you just have an older vehicle, be sure to keep an eye out for this kind of problem. A quick hit with the cutoff disc removes the rest of the hardware. Then the leaf spring bolts can come out with, of course, a little persuasion from our friend the hammer. Then the leaf springs can be removed from the truck and set aside. The last part to go is the tailpipe, which we'll be upgrading later on.
Next, drop and give me 6.
The next step is to lower the whole truck closer to the rear axle so we can install the leaf springs underneath the axle this time. The only problem is we've removed a lot of weight from the rear end of this frame and the truck isn't very well balanced. In fact, I have a screw jack up front that's supporting a lot of the weight. So we need to add some ballast back here so whenever I raise the lift, the truck doesn't do a nosedive. So nothing works better than a couple of old mud tires. Usually that's done with a keg, but a couple of tires work too. The truck frame is lowered down towards the axle, and the leaf springs go right back into place. And the hardware gets snug, but we'll torque it later on with the truck on the ground. The axle saddles install over the spring center bolt with a hole towards the front. The truck is raised back up, and the axle slides right into its new home, 6 inches lower than before. The provided U-bolts slide on, along with a lower spring mount, and nuts and washers hold everything together. Because the truck is going to sit so much lower, the kit includes these shock extensions. They require the original large shock bolt, a 5/16 hole to be drilled, and 2 small bolts will keep it from twisting. Now, the new shocks can be installed, which are optimized for a lowered street truck. Now, it's just a matter of making things look nice and pretty. I'll knock down the plug welds with a 40 grit flap wheel, then switch to 80 grit. And finally, some cleanup work with 80 grit on a DA sander. We're not looking for perfection here, just a smooth and low-key appearance. I'll hit it with some wax and grease remover, etch prime the bare metal spots, then hit it with a few coats of Duplicolor semi-gloss black. Lastly, the new shorter bump stops go into a pre-drilled hole in the notch. I think this is kind of cool because half the people who watch this are going to hate it, but secretly like it. And the other half of people who watch this are going to go home and they're going to want to do it. That's why a lowered four-wheel drive is awesome.
There, I got it.
I like how you don't mess around, Pat.
I don't mess around with stuff like this.
Full throttle.
You get where you need to be on that filler neck, you tell me when.
Okay, I'm around it, so you can come on down.
I'm in the wrong business.
I guess so. It's perfect. A flip kit will lower the rear of any truck, whether it's 2 or 4-wheel drive. The front is where things get just a little bit different. Normally, all I'd have to do is install these dropped torsion bar keys and it would bring the front end down. However, this truck's actually been leveled up, so there are a few parts that we're going to have to replace. Number one is the upper control arm. It has a modified ball joint angle that will work well with a truck that's been leveled, so we'll swap these out for a stock set. Number two is the front differential. It's actually been dropped 2 inches down in the frame for an improved CV angle, again, on a lifted truck. So we'll have to take those spacers out. When all that stuff is done, then I can install the torsion bar keys and we'll have ourselves a dropped 4-wheel drive truck.
Next, with 6 done in the rear, we go for 4 in the front.
We're nearly done dropping RedTide, our 88 K1500, and we'll get started on the front by pulling off the original shocks. Then, loosen the nut that holds the ball joint to the spindle, and loosen the taper with a hammer. Underneath the truck, we'll use a special tool to loosen the tension on the torsion bar key. Then we can safely remove the stock adjusters and back off the tension on the tool. An air hammer knocks out the torsion bar and the lift keys are removed. Now the lifted upper control arms are removed from the truck. And we can replace them with a new stock set with a proper ball joint angle. Plus, the new bushings will be an added bonus. I'll put the camber bolts in the middle of their travel, but the alignment shop will have to do the final adjustment. Now we can tackle the front diff. We'll remove the passenger side drop bracket.
Ooh, man, look at that.
And replace it with a stock one we got from a junkyard. On the driver's side, simply remove the aftermarket parts. Then the diff can be raised back up into its original home, lined up, and tightened back down. Now the dropped torsion bar keys can go into place. The bars are wiggled in, and the adjusters are installed. Lastly, the new shorter shocks can go in up front to finish lowering this four-wheel drive sport truck. Since our truck is sitting so much closer to the ground now, there's no way these 33-inch mud terrains are going to fit back on. They're much too tall and they stick out way too far. So we need a wheel that has a high positive offset to keep the tires sucked inside the fenders so nothing will rub. I ordered these from OE Wheels, an industry leader in manufacturing and designing replica wheels. They have over 500 styles to choose from, and these are actually designed from a late model GMC truck. They're a 20x9 wheel with a positive 27 offset, but you can get this style in sizes up to 24 inches, and we chose the polished finish. They're wrapped in some Nitto 420s, which we picked up from Summit Racing. They're sized at a 285/40/20, and they'll give our sport truck great traction in the wet or dry. You can tell if you've been successful lowering your truck if you get it on the ground and you can't get the lift arms out from underneath. Luckily, we've got a floor jack. Well, here it is, Jeremy. Looks a lot different than it did before, but tell me honestly, what do you think?
Okay, well, if I have to be completely honest with you, for a four-wheel drive truck, it looks pretty good sitting on the ground.
It looks a heck of a lot different for sure, but my favorite part is the wheels. It really brings it into the 21st century. And the cool thing is, the only way that the average guy would be able to tell that this is a four-wheel drive truck, just by looking at it, is seeing the wheels and counting the 6 lugs.
You did a great job picking them out, and obviously with the width, it's probably gonna make it drive like it's on rails.
Oh man, this thing will be great. And tell you what, first time we bring it out, I'll come and get you and we'll go for a spin.
That sounds awesome.
But check out the inside, just how nice it is for being an 88.
Yeah, it's a classic.
Everybody has their own first truck, and for millions of Americans, it was the 88 to 98 K1500. Today, we ditch the factory 350 in ours for an inexpensive modern long block. Plus, this beefier trans will handle all that added power. It's time for Truck Tech.
Today we're going to be spending some time on this little red four-wheel drive that we dropped to the ground. It's called Project RedTide, and we lowered it 4 inches in the front and 6 inches in the rear, and it's sitting on a set of 20-inch GMC replica wheels. From the outside, it looks pretty sick, but underneath the hood, well, it's honestly unhealthy. The TBI 350 has 185,000 miles on it. It burns a bunch of oil and it smokes real bad. Now, originally, this truck had 190 horsepower, but over the last 30 years, a lot of those ponies have escaped. So today, we're going to work on making this truck perform a little bit closer to how it looks, because right now, it's all show and no go. Over the years, we have made power upgrades to many different trucks. If you want to keep your original engine and spice things up a little bit, you could change some parts around in the induction department to let more air into and out of the engine. We added an additional 100 horsepower to this 351 Windsor simply by adding a larger camshaft, better flowing cylinder heads, a high flow aluminum intake, and a larger carburetor. Making big power with a naturally aspirated engine is a good way to have a responsive and fun driving engine, and when matched with a proper gear set, it can be a blast to drive. There are a lot of top-end packages out there for the old school small block Chevy, and by increasing compression ratio and airflow, your horsepower will go up as well. The problem is on this bottom end, well, the piston rings are so worn, the pistons won't be able to hold back all that cylinder pressure to make the power that we're expecting. Really, all we'd be doing is wasting some money. Another option we could do is take apart the original engine, do some machine work, and increase the displacement with a stroker crankshaft. A 383 cubic inch small block Chevy can easily make 450 horsepower, and when topped with a proper induction, it would make great torque. The only problem with doing a stroker style rebuild of our stock 350 comes down to cost. When you consider the price of the rotating assembly, the pistons, rods, and crank, the cylinder heads, the valve train, not to mention the machine work that we'll need to make it all work together, and the new EFI system that we'll need to make it all run properly, we're going to have a bill somewhere in the neighborhood of $6,000 to $8,000, and that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense when it comes to figuring out the power gain for each dollar that we're going to spend. A power adder is also a great option, like this turbo system we installed on White Noise, a 2010 Silverado with a cammed 5.3. A single 76mm turbocharger running at 8 pounds of boost pressure increased the power of this otherwise stock engine to 498 horsepower and 481 pounds of torque at the rear wheel. The great thing about a turbocharger or any power adder is how much horsepower that you'll gain for every dollar that you spend. They're really efficient in that sense. The problem is, again, this stock bottom end. So before we do anything, we need to take care of this worn out engine. You've probably figured it out by now. We're actually going to be doing an engine swap. And yes, it is part of the LS family. This is actually a 5.3 liter LM7 we picked up from PowerTrain products, and it's not stock. It's actually a high-performance crate engine designed for swaps like we're doing in RedTide. It comes in with a dyno-proven horsepower of 400 and 392 pounds of torque at the flywheel. The camshaft comes in at 218 and 228 degrees of duration at 50,000 lift. It has upgraded valve springs, a heavy-duty timing set, and an upgraded oil pump. And any factory issue that these engines had from GM have already been corrected. The best part is this whole long block only costs $3,500 and it has a 2-year warranty, making it the perfect candidate for an engine swap like this. Now we're going to be doubling the stock power of that TBI 350, and the first thing we need to do is get it yanked out.
Next, the proper way to pull a motor.
When you're going to pull an engine and transmission out of a pickup truck, or really any vehicle, there are a lot of systems that you're going to have to physically disconnect before you can lift the powertrain out. You've got the electrical side of things, the air intake, the cooling system, power steering, air conditioning, transmission lines, a whole bunch of fluids that need to be drained out, and on top of that, a bunch of little small cables, brackets, and vacuum lines and things like that. So today I'm going to kind of slow things down just a little bit and show you guys the basics of removing an engine and transmission efficiently and without damaging anything. For safety reasons, the first thing to be disconnected and removed is the battery. Then the air cleaner and silencer tube come off. And we can tackle the wiring harness starting at the AC pump and the alternator. All right, so the only time I want to see you grab a pair of wire cutters on a project like this is for cutting something like a zip tie. Now, I know there's a lot of small vacuum lines and things that you think you might not need to use again, and it's easier just to snip them. But take the time, disconnect everything properly, because you really never know what you need to reuse later on. On a fuel-injected engine, there are a lot of electrical connections to deal with, and several grounds as well. Each plug is different and they can only hook up to one sensor, so in the event you ever need to reconnect anything, there won't be any mix-ups. With everything disconnected, we can get the harness out of the way.
All right, that's one good chunk.
Toward the rear of the engine, the spark plug wires are disconnected from the distributor, and the plugs at the coil are removed. Then the other end of the spark plug wires are unplugged and removed from the truck. There are 3 control cables that have to be disconnected at the throttle body. One for the cruise control, the throttle pedal, and the TV cable that controls transmission line pressure.
Pulls off.
This fluid evacuator is a cheap tool that pays for itself the first couple times you use it. Next are the return and pressure lines, which get disconnected. And by tying the hose up to the alternator, we'll stop it from dripping all over the place. The fuel lines at the throttle body are disconnected. Then the coolant is drained and mostly collected in a pan. And with a little cleanup taken care of, we can remove the upper radiator hose. The top half of the fan shroud comes off, followed by the engine-driven cooling fan.
So if this is the first time that you're doing any major work like this, pulling an engine out or doing a swap, it can be very difficult to keep track of all the hardware because you're going to have hundreds of tiny little nuts and bolts and washers and things like that. So one thing I do to keep track of where everything goes is put it back on after you've taken the part off. That way you know exactly where it goes and you're not hunting through a big bucket of bolts trying to figure out what went where.
Next, I'll have to remove a few lines from the radiator, an overflow, a heater core return, and both transmission cooler lines, before the radiator can be removed from the truck. The Freon has leaked out some time ago, so I can disconnect the hoses on the back of the AC compressor. Now, a final heater core line and the vacuum line for the brake booster come off, and I can pull the fluid out of the transmission through the dipstick. Next, I'll get the truck up in the air and drain the fluid from the transfer case. We'll get both the rear and front drive shafts out of the way and set them in the scrap pile. We'll have to custom order new ones with the engine and transmission combination we've selected. I'll cut the exhaust in the middle and remove the rear section. Then disconnect the bolts at the manifold.
Somebody broke a stud off.
And the front Y pipe and converter come out. We need to talk about what parts of the drivetrain we're going to remove at the same time. I have seen guys leave everything connected together or even just the transfer case to the transmission. The trouble with those methods is, well, they're very bulky and difficult to maneuver, and your chances of damaging sheet metal are very high. If this is your first time pulling out a drivetrain, I recommend you break it down into as small of pieces as possible. Transfer cases, they're usually very light and easy to maneuver. And the transmission, that pulls out very easily with the trans jack. And once those two parts are out, you can easily remove the engine from the top without damaging anything. So we'll get started by yanking off this transfer case.
And after that, Mike lends a hand. That's next.
We're a little more than halfway done pulling the drivetrain out of RedTide, our '88 Chevy. I'll remove the converter cover, giving access to the bolts that hold the flex plate to the torque converter. On a 700R4, there are 3. Once I remove the shift linkage, I can bring the trans jack in and slightly raise the transmission, getting the weight off the cross member so it can be removed. Finally, the main bolts that hold the transmission to the engine are threaded out, and the trans is slowly lowered down and removed from the truck. Now we're in the home stretch. Up top, all we have left to do is attach our lift sling to the exhaust manifold bolts and let our crane do the heavy lifting.
Go that way just a hair.
On my way,
Yep.
the manifold is hitting the cab.
There we go.
Doesn't get much easier than that.
So you wanted me to ship this next door to y'all, right?
Negative. This could be your first engine rebuild in here.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, this is too high tech for me.
All right, you need anything else?
That's it, man. Hey, appreciate it.
See you, man.
See you next time. Just because the engine and drivetrain are removed from the truck doesn't mean the job of teardown is complete. There are a few more things that we need to remove from the engine bay to clean up some of this mess and make preparations for the 5.3 LS that's going to be living in here in just a little bit. And we'll get started by tackling this wiring harness. There are a lot of circuits in this harness that I won't need to reuse, mostly for the TBI electronics. But there are some wires that I'll need to keep, like for the starter, gauges, and alternator. So I'll remove it all from the truck and modify it later on. Next, the trans cooler lines go, followed by the heater hoses. Then I'll get the truck up in the air. Since I have something special planned for the front diff, I'll drain it, remove the bolts for the CV axles, unbolt the mounts, and get it out of the way for now. Then since we can't put a shiny new engine into a greasy truck, a quick degrease and a power wash will make the engine bay look much better. I think that'll work out nicely. Well, we've got our mess cleaned up, the truck is back in the shop, and we're ready to move on to the fun stuff. Now, the hardest part about doing just about any engine swap is finding a way to position the new engine into the old chassis in the correct position so things like the oil pan, exhaust system, and the intake manifold are going to clear without hitting any parts of the old body. Luckily, we're doing an LS swap, and it's a very common thing to do nowadays, so there are a lot of options on the aftermarket that will allow us to easily bolt this engine into the K1500's chassis without doing any custom fabrication or guesswork. We picked up these adapters from Hooker Headers, and they're going to bolt onto the side of the LS engine block, and they have a place to mount the small block Chevy style engine side, part of the original mounting system. Now on the chassis side, all we're going to do is use the original style rubber isolator, and this engine will be in the exact correct position for everything to fit. Now these install very easily. With a little thread locker, the adapters install using countersunk hardware. They are zinc plated for corrosion resistance, and they're 3/8 inch thick for maximum strength. I trimmed the tab off the original spacer, which we'll reuse to maintain proper alignment. And 3 bolts hold the whole thing together. The passenger side needed a small notch in the mount to clear the block, and it gets bolted onto the adapter. Now this LS is ready for our chassis.
Next, find out who is LT's next co-host.
We're back on Truck Tech, preparing our new 5.3 to fit in our '88 Chevy. We could adapt our original 700R4 to work behind the new 5.3, but they're not the strongest transmission out there, and this one has a bunch of miles on it, so it would probably need a refresh anyway. Instead, we're going to be upgrading to a 4L80E. Now, you can almost think of them as an electronic turbo 400, but with overdrive, so they're already an upgrade over the old 700. But this is a Gearstar Level 3 build that's rated to withstand 600 horsepower. It's been modified inside to hold additional clutch packs over a stock build, has heat-treated shafts, and inside it has all-new wiring and solenoids. And up front, it has a Yank 2800 RPM stall speed converter that'll really help our heavy truck get moving off the line, and it works well with our camshaft that we've selected. They also sent us a transmission cooler with a cooling fan built on top, and to complete the installation, we went to Summit Racing for a few odds and ends, like a transmission mount, an SFI certified flex plate with a converter pilot adapter for putting a 4L80 behind an LS, some ARP flywheel bolts, and of course, a dipstick. Our installation starts under the hood by bolting on some new stock replacement motor mounts, since the old ones had seen better days. Then we'll bring in the 5.3 and slowly lower it into place. With the Hooker adapters, it drops in just like the old one came out. Well, that was way too easy. Then the stock bolts hold it all together. With the truck raised up in the air, we can install the SFI certified flex plate onto the back of the crank. To ensure a proper torque reading and stop them from backing out, the bolts get a dab of ultra torque and thread locker. Then they get torqued in sequence to 84 foot-pounds. The new transmission comes in, and the pilot spacer goes onto the converter. Then the transmission gets raised up into place, aligned on the dowel pins, and the hardware can go in. Never use the bolts to draw the transmission onto the dowels, as you can crack the aluminum case. Now, the 4L80 gets raised up a bit higher, and the stock cross member can be installed onto the C-channel of the frame. The studs are lined up, and the nuts are tightened up. One thing you want to check when you install any automatic transmission is that the torque converter can freely spin after the engine and trans have been bolted together. If it can't, the converter has been installed improperly and is putting way too much pressure on the oil pump, and it could cause damage. The converter bolts also get a dab of thread locker, and they are installed but kept loose for now. Then the engine is spun by hand until all 6 bolts are in. Then they get torqued to 45 foot-pounds. Lastly, it's important to install a torque converter cover, as it's a structural part of the drivetrain. This one came from Summit Racing. Anytime you do a major drivetrain overhaul, you're going to be left with a lot of extra parts. Whether it's an old engine that you're replacing or an entire drivetrain, the stuff takes up a lot of space, like old transmissions, transfer cases, front differential, or even small parts like brackets and wiring harnesses. It kind of clutters things up. A lot of people are tempted to load everything up and go to the dump and just get rid of it, or even stick it on Craigslist and make a couple of quick bucks. The problem with that is, well, there's a lot of small parts that are still attached to your old drivetrain that you will need to reuse. And if you get rid of it too soon, it'll come back and bite you. I always tell people, save everything until the project is 100% done and you're running and driving down the road with no issues. Then you can load up and clean out your shop. If you have a higher mileage truck or maybe a vehicle with a blown engine, you'll want to refresh it with a remanufactured engine of the same type. So you'll probably grab a long block. We ordered a 5.3 LS for our K1500, and as you can see, you'll only get the basics like the engine block, cylinder heads, oil pan, valve covers, and balancer. But every accessory required to run the engine is not included when you purchase a long block. Obviously, a small block Chevy and an LS are not the same engine, but the point is this: whenever you're installing a long block, there's a lot of parts you're going to need to reuse. Take the accessory drive, for example. You've got the air conditioning pump, the alternator, the water pump, power steering pump, plus the tensioners, idlers, and all the small brackets needed to make everything line up properly. Then there's a lot of other parts like the starter, exhaust manifold, intake manifold, the fuel injection system, and all the sensors up top. Plus, you've got a flex plate out back, a distributor here, and there's a lot of stuff you need to reuse. Now, we are doing an engine swap, but that doesn't mean we're out of the woods, because there's still some stuff we need to transfer over. Like, we already repurposed our motor mounts. There's going to be some sensors we pull out so the factory gauges still work. And then you've got something as simple as this: the vacuum line for the brake booster. We can easily adapt this to work on our 5.3, saving a couple of bucks. When we pulled the powertrain out of Project RedTide, I also took the time to remove the entire underhood wiring harness, and not a single wire was cut. Now, this is a perfect example of why you want to save the parts until the job is done. Now, the TBI computer obviously will not control an LS engine, and most of the wires in the engine branch of the harness are not going to be reused, but there are some circuits here that we need to keep. Things like power distribution, air conditioning, and the wires that run the gauges up to the instrument cluster. Now, if you're in this situation, you have a lot of work ahead of you, but you'll be thankful that you kept the original wires to work with. You just have to cut this thing apart, pull out the circuits that you want to keep, and put it all back together. But you have the parts to work with, and that's what matters. The old small block is out of here, and that new 5.3 and 4L80E are permanently bolted into their new home. Obviously, it doesn't run yet. We've got a few more goodies left to install. And we just got in some new exciting drivetrain parts that'll really make RedTide stand apart from the crowd. I have an announcement to make. After a long search, we've found a new co-host for Truck Tech. His name is Austin LaForte, a lifelong hot rodder and gearhead from New Orleans via California. He'll be joining our team here in a few weeks. Looking forward to it. For more information on RedTide or any of our other builds, be sure to check out PowerNationTV.com.
Four-wheel drive versus all-wheel drive. What's the diff? We'll convert Project RedTide into all-wheel by sourcing parts to bring full-time power to every corner. And our 5.3 LS gets top-end goodies to bring the go. It's time for Truck Tech.
Today we're going to be spending some quality time with RedTide, our '88 Chevy 1500 four-wheel drive that's been lowered down to the ground. And we're going to be doing something that, to my knowledge, has never been done before in an old body style GMT 400 Chevy truck. Now, last time you guys saw RedTide, we had yanked out the old TBI 350 and we replaced it with this 400 horse 5.3 liter LS engine and a 4L80E automatic trans. But it's just a bare engine and trans. There's no accessories, exhaust, intake, or wiring that we'll need to make it all run. And we'll take care of that in just a little bit. But first, we just got in some new drivetrain parts that I'm dying to show you. So just ignore this stuff over here for a minute. Our truck originally came equipped with an NP241 2-speed mechanical shift transfer case and, out front, a GM 8¼ independent front differential with a passenger side axle disconnect. Now, there's really no reason we can't reuse both of these parts. On the transfer case, all we'd have to do is take it apart and swap out the original 27-spline input shaft for a larger 32-spline input that'll work with the 4L80 transmission. It would only cost about $100 and take 30 minutes to take apart the transfer case and make the switch. Having a lowered four-wheel drive truck is cool, and a lot of guys who drag race simply shift into four-wheel drive at the line, make the pass, and shift out of four-wheel drive at the end of the track. As long as you're driving in a straight line on pavement, the four-wheel drive system will work just fine, but you cannot use it driving around corners. Now that's fine if all you want to do is go drag racing, but we want to build something just a little bit different. Now, if you know of the Silverado SS that was made between 2003 and 2006, you'll remember that it was a full-time all-wheel drive truck, and it used a special transfer case with a viscous coupling inside that split the power 62% to the rear and 38% to the front. And we just found one. This is an NV149 transfer case we picked up from PowerTrain products, and it's been remanufactured with a new chain, bearings, and seals. Now, this was intended to be a replacement part for a later model truck, but it'll work perfectly to convert our old Chevy into a full-time all-wheel drive traction machine. Now, this will still work great at the drag strip for those launches, but you can still use it in everyday driving conditions as well, like snow, ice, dirt roads, or even just dry pavement, and you don't have to worry about switching into and out of four-wheel drive. The best part about the 149 case, though, is that it's a completely mechanical device, meaning there are no wires or control modules needed to make this work in our classic Chevy. One very important thing about running a full-time all-wheel drive transfer case has to do with the front differential. Both axle shafts have to be receiving power at all times. And if you remember, this differential has a disconnect on the passenger side, so that axle just spins freely. Now, there's a small fix for that if we want to use this axle. One solution would be to remove the thermal linear actuator and install this 4x4 permanent lock I picked up from Summit Racing. It pushes in on the shift fork, engaging the passenger side axle, and a pair of set screws hold it in place. This is an inexpensive way to get the job done. But sending a lot of power through a locked-out axle shaft may not be the best long-term solution, especially on a vehicle that's going to spend a lot of time at highway speeds. Instead, I ordered a rebuilt front differential from PowerTrain products that fits the Silverado SS, certain Escalades, and Denali's. This one has a 4:10 gear ratio, which is going to be perfect for our truck. This has the updated pinion design to prevent the common failures, and since this is from an all-wheel drive application, it has the much stronger one-piece passenger side axle shaft. Now, the 88 to 98 trucks have a totally different frame than the 99 to 07 trucks that this differential was designed to fit. Now, honestly, when I ordered this, I had no idea if it would even work, but luckily, it's a much closer matchup than you might think.
Next, a little fab makes it fit.
The first step to converting RedTide to all-wheel drive is getting the front differential mounted, and it's actually pretty remarkable how well this later model diff fits into this early year truck. In fact, both mounting points on the driver's side are in exactly the correct position, so the only thing we'll have to do there is come in and rebuild the lower mount tab that was cut off when the truck was lifted in its previous life. The flange-to-flange width of the axle is exactly the same as it was before, as are the mounting dimensions where the CV axle attaches. This is almost a bolt-in installation. In fact, the only thing that we're going to have to change is this mounting bracket on the passenger side because the boss is cast in just a little bit different position. So all we need to do is build a new passenger side bracket and we're in business. I'm using the old lifted diff mount as a donor for the bushing ends. A little work with a cutoff wheel frees them up. I'll clean the old welds and paint with a flap wheel. Now, I'll place the bushings back into the factory mounts on the frame. I'm notching some 1 3/4 tube to make the backbone of the mount. I made a template from cardboard and will transfer all the dimensions onto some 3/16 plate, which will include a line for a fold and some notches to be cut out for the tube. Finally, it gets trimmed out on the bandsaw. Underneath the truck, the backbone goes onto the bushings, and our plate mount goes in. It's temporarily bolted onto the axle. With everything in position, I'll first tack weld the backbone to the bushing end, then the tab to the backbone. Now I can remove it from the truck and add a gusset in the center. Then finish weld the whole mount assembly. There are no off-the-shelf parts made for this swap, but it's just one of those situations where you have to get a little creative, use some fabrication tools, and you can build anything you need. It's these little steps that'll transform a run-of-the-mill build into something that's truly unique and one of a kind. With the front differential in its new home, the only thing we have left to do to convert this truck to all-wheel drive is install the transfer case. Now, these NV149s were only found behind 4L60s that had a 27-spline output shaft that keys in to the input of the transfer case. On most four-wheel drive transfer cases, that's not a big deal because there are some readily available factory parts like our 241, which came behind 4L80s in certain applications. The 149, though, never came behind a 4L80, so there are no readily available factory parts we could use to make the switch. There is, however, a company up in Michigan that custom manufactures shafts, and they built us a 32-spline input shaft that goes inside of our NV149. So all we got to do is take this thing apart and make the switch.
Next, transfer case tech.
It can be floating around up here and not picking up any oil. If that happens, we're opening up a brand new transfer case for Project RedTide, and in the process, building a truck that's unlike any we've ever seen, making what we think will be the world's first all-wheel drive GMT 400 Chevy truck. To accomplish that, we need to install a different input shaft into this NV149. The rear bearing C-clip is disengaged through an access hole, and using a pair of pry bars, the glue sealing the two case halves together is cracked open, and the rear half of the case is removed. Now, the rear planetary and main shaft slide out, followed by the sprocket and chain.
Brand new chain. This guy right here. This is the viscous coupling. This is actually a non-serviceable item, but this is the part that makes the all-wheel drive magic happen. And that is our input shaft.
The last part holding the input shaft in is a C-clip, and once it's removed, a few gentle taps with a plastic dead blow frees it from the case. Finally, one more C-clip has to go, and the hammer helps remove the bearing. Now the process gets reversed, with the bearing and C-clip going onto the 32-spline shaft.
Always want to take the time to make sure the snap rings are fully engaged in the slot, because if they're not, things could come apart and do a lot of damage. This guy's set. So back in it goes. You ready?
Yeah.
With a wooden block, the shaft and bearing are driven into the front case half.
Hear the sound change?
I think you're in.
That's how you know you're in.
The C-clip goes back in, followed by the viscous coupler. Then the chain and sprocket, and the main shaft and planetary slide back in. Then we'll clean any old sealant from the mating surface. So probably the most important part about putting a transfer case back together is this guy right here, the oil pump pickup tube. Now, if you put this together incorrectly, and the suction tube is not lined up with the sump, it can be floating around up here and not picking up any oil. If that happens, the transfer case, it'll still work, but it'll probably burn itself out. So always make sure the pickup tube is in the sump at the bottom of the case. A little RTV is applied to seal up the case, and the rear half slides on, making sure to line up with the two internal shafts and the dowel pins. Now, the final C-clip is opened up, and the rear bearing is slid into place.
Right on the money.
It's a bit awkward, but the case gets maneuvered up between the two cross members. The shafts line up, and with a bit of wiggling, the trans and transfer case are united. A few bolts hold the whole package together, completing our all-wheel drive conversion.
Hey guys,
Hello.
howdy. What's going on?
Last time I saw this truck, it was covered in mud and it had large tires on it. Now, it's totally changed. LS swap,
Yes.
and I don't know what kind of cajavis is in this thing now for this. It all looks new. What's going on?
You've been busy for sure.
I've been a little bit busy, yeah. So we're trying to make something that's a little bit different, a little bit special. So we made an all-wheel drive truck, right? Something that they never made in this GMT 400 platform, right? So I robbed a bunch of parts from a later model truck, actually. Transfer case, that's from like the Silverado SS's, maybe the Escalades and Denali's. The front differential, this is probably my favorite part about this whole swap. This front diff, even though it's from a 99 to 07 truck, it actually, on this side, bolted right in. And the only thing I had to do, be able to custom mount on the passenger side. But I mean, the axle to axle width was the same. The bolt pattern for the CVs was exactly the same, so.
You built this mount?
Yeah.
Really? That's awesome.
That's pretty impressive that the track width and all is dead on.
I think that's my favorite part about this whole thing is because I've had this idea for a while that I wanted to try to build an all-wheel drive truck. Yeah, really, I ordered that front diff entirely on a whim, not even knowing if it would fit, but it's so close, it's actually almost perfect.
Yeah, it's pretty neat that you went down this path. You know, I'm a big fan of the S10 trucks. Now it's full size. That's way cool.
I really like it. Now with the LS swap, you have a lot of potential to make more power because of all the parts that are available.
It all comes down to something you can use every day. So if you have a whole lot of power, you drive it in the rain or the snow, you're just gonna be spinning out. So all-wheel drive, use it all the time and just be different, I guess.
Oh, it's definitely different, but I like it and I like it a lot. So good job.
All right, so you guys want to do any sanding and painting? Get some.
He's pretty good at painting.
Yeah, painting. Yeah, I could paint the block. That's about the extent of my talent, but that's
All right.
other than that.
Speaking of paint, what about that blue transmission? That thing's kind of electric under here.
Very patriotic with the red truck.
Yeah.
Next, here come the power.
Our all-wheel drive conversion is done on this old body style Chevy. Now, I could spend some time out back and re-gear the 10-bolt to a 4:10 ratio that would match the new front axle that we just installed. But instead, I'm going to spend some time on this engine and see if we can get it a little bit closer to firing up. Because right now, this 5.3 is just a bare long block. All the important parts that it needs to fire up and run haven't been installed yet. Recently, I did some shopping, and the delivery guy, well, he just dropped off a whole bunch of parts. I started out by going to Summit Racing and picking up a set of ceramic-coated long tube headers. Then I welded on some stainless steel 3-inch V-bands that'll connect to our exhaust later on. Then, for an intake manifold, I picked up this Holley high ram with a wrinkle black finish. Now, it looks great, but the long runner design is going to help make great low RPM torque. And if we ever decide to install a power adder, it's going to work great there as well. I also picked up a set of matching wrinkle black Holley valve covers, and Excel sent us some 61 pound-per-hour fuel injectors and some ceramic-coated spark plug wires. Then Summit sent us a few more odds and ends to complete the swap, like a water pump, starter, ignition coils, cam and crank sensor, and a dipstick. And it's all going to be controlled by this Holley Terminator LS multi-port injection setup. But we'll get started by installing the headers. These are a pace setter header designed to fit a 99 to 07 four-wheel drive Silverado. But luckily, they're a perfect fit for our LS swap truck. On the back of the block, the camshaft sensor slides in. And up front, the steam vent adapters attached to the cylinder head, which later get connected to the radiator to relieve pressure in the cooling system. Then, the front of the block is quickly prepped with a scuff pad, and the water pump gets bolted into place. We need to install an O-ring to seal the lid to the intake. It gets trimmed to length, and a couple dabs of RTV hold it in place. The lid goes on and gets bolted down. Now, all 8 injectors get lubed up and slid into the fuel rails. And the whole thing installs into the intake with just a little pressure. It all gets held in place with 2 bolts and spacers. Then each intake port gets an O-ring to seal it against the head. Back at the engine, the manifold slides right into place and nuts and washers hold it down. Now the stock valve covers get swapped for the taller black ones. The ignition coils go on and the plug wires are attached. The dipstick slides into the block and bolts to the head. Then the injector harness plugs in along with the coil harness. Finally, the crank sensor goes in, followed by the starter. Four-wheel drive, independent front suspension systems have been used on a lot of pickups since sometime in the 1980s. Consumers started demanding pickups that were more and more comfortable, something they could use every day rather than those old-school solid axles which just rode like a covered wagon. This is a GM 8¼ inch front differential that we pulled out of our 88 K1500, and that's the first year GM used IFS on a full-size four-wheel drive truck. Now, a lot of people have no idea how these things work inside or what it takes to disassemble one. So today we're going to take a closer look. But first, we'll do a comparison between an IFS front end and an old school solid axle. They're actually much more similar than you might think. Both have a ring gear inside and a pinion gear that's attached to a drive shaft coming from the transfer case. And both have a way to disconnect power from the wheels so you're not spinning the whole drive line when you're rolling down the road. On the old school axle, it's out here on the end of the hub. And on the IFS front end, it has an electronic disconnect mounted inside the axle. And that's where we're going to start our teardown. This is a thermal linear actuator, and it simply unscrews from the housing. Then a few bolts come out and the diff comes apart. Here we can see the passenger side 2-piece axle disconnect system. This is what creates the link and power between the spinning wheel and the rest of the drivetrain. It's a cool combination between electronic and mechanical parts. This is how it works. As you apply 12 volts of power across the coil, the actuator heats up inside, expands, and pushes the rod out. Then when you remove power, it contracts back in. The actuator installs into the side of the housing, and as it expands, the end pushes out against a shift fork. There's a small dowel on the outside axle shaft that centers the inside, and as the shift fork extends, a collar slides over the splined areas of both parts of the axles, engaging four-wheel drive. Then, when you disengage it, a spring pushes the shift fork back, releasing the collar. Finally, there's a small switch that tells the light on the dashboard when four-wheel drive is engaged. Disassembly continues with a few more bolts holding the main case halves together, and a pry bar opens them up. The CV flange on the driver's side is held in with an internal clip, so it takes a bit of force to pop out. From there, the carrier comes out and it looks just like any other rear-wheel drive differential you're used to looking at. Now that you have the cases fully split, you can do several things. Put on new bearings to quiet down a noisy differential, reseal it to prevent a leak, or you can even re-gear because there are a lot of different aftermarket ratios available for the 8¼ front end. Now that you've taken it apart, it's real easy to put back together. We've made great progress on this 5.3 today, and I have a few odds and ends left to install. I need to get the main wiring harness on for the fuel injection, find a place to mount the computer, get an accessory drive installed, a cooling system, and a fuel system. But the all-wheel drive conversion is a success. The only thing I have left to finish up on the drivetrain is the rear axle, which needs to be re-geared to match the front. If you want any more information on any of the projects we build on this show, be sure to check out PowerNationTV.com. Thanks for watching Truck Tech, and we'll see you next time.
Why call our 88 K1500 project RedTide? Because we tied all 4 wheels together, making it an all-wheel drive traction monster. Today, the 5.3 LS gets topped off, including an upgraded fuel system. Plus, we'll introduce you to the newest member of our team.
Welcome to the shop. Today we're going to be working on Project RedTide. Now, we're smack dab in the middle of an LS swap, and we just finished up a conversion to all-wheel drive, making this 88 K1500 truly a unique build.
Now, it has a 400 horsepower 5.3 sitting in between the frame rails, but we haven't heard it run yet. So today, that's what I'm going to focus on. I need to finish up some plumbing and then get some accessories bolted onto the front end of this engine, and then just maybe we'll hear it run. Our truck came equipped with a TBI style fuel system that put out around 12 pounds of fuel pressure, which just isn't going to cut it for that 5.3. So basically, we're starting over. I grabbed a factory style in-tank fuel pump assembly, and the only reason I did that is because our stock lines on the outside are actually fairly rusty and I didn't want to risk it. And that's the same case for the hard lines that run down the frame. Now this pump again isn't going to cut it, so I'm replacing it with a Walbro 255 liter per hour in-tank electric fuel pump. Then the next stop that the fuel is going to make is to this GM fuel pressure regulator and filter assembly that we got in a kit from Summit Racing that comes with hose and push lock fittings that we need to complete the installation. Next up, we need a way to drive the accessories on the front of the engine. So I grabbed another kit from Summit Racing that came with everything we need, like an air conditioning compressor, passenger side brackets, tensioners, idlers, power steering reservoir, driver's side brackets, power steering pump, and the alternator. And we're going to get our installation started on the driver's side of the engine. This accessory drive will work with many different LS engines, and the spacer you need depends on your water pump and harmonic balancer. Both of ours are from a truck application. The bracket for the power steering reservoir goes on with the top two bolts. Now, the power steering pump bolts into the lower portion of the bracket, and a smooth idler pulley goes on. Next, the alternator slides into place, and the reservoir and hose for the power steering system now slide in, and a spring clamp holds it in place. The passenger side bracket goes on with two long bolts and a short Allen head screw. With a small spacer, the spring-loaded belt tensioner goes on, followed by the AC compressor. And a grooved idler pulley finishes up the accessory drive. Now, we'll install some O-rings and attach the original AC line to the back of the pump. We'll attach a 5/8 and 3/4 inch hose to the heater core, mark for length, trim the hose, and attach the other end to the LS water pump. When you're shopping for all the small parts that you'll need to complete your engine swap, it can be very tempting to go out and get some custom one-off parts because they usually look great and function even better. Now, I always like to think about servicing the vehicle later on. Let's say, for example, you have an upper radiator hose that's made from AN line and fittings. You're on a road trip and that hose springs a leak. Well, it can be very difficult to get the parts that you need in a hurry and get back on the road. But if you chose an upper radiator hose, for example, that fits an 02 Silverado, I can guarantee you almost every parts store in the country is going to have one of these sitting on the shelf, and it's not going to cost you that much money. And the same thing holds true for all the other components that we put on this engine. The air conditioning compressor, for example, is actually the original style for this truck. The tensioner and idler pulleys are all readily available sizes, and the same thing holds for the water pump, power steering pump, alternator, ignition coils, and even the idle air control motor and the throttle position sensor. It's all about readily available parts to get you back on the road in a hurry.
Next, fuel for the fire.
Hey guys, welcome back to the shop. We're getting ready to start the fuel system on RedTide, our '88 Chevy K1500, and we're starting out back at the tank. It may seem very drastic to pull the bed off of a pickup truck just to gain access to the fuel tank, but there's a few reasons why it's actually easier in the long run. Number one, this tank is nearly full of fuel, so it's very heavy. And number two, all these connections would be very difficult to access with the bed on the truck because you've got to reach your hand up between the bedside and over the frame to undo all these fittings. So it's much easier in the long run just to do it with the bed off the truck. The old fuel lines unscrew, followed by the vent tubes and some electrical connections. To prevent any chance of sparks, I always use a brass punch when removing a fuel pump retainer. the same to me. Let's get to work. We'll start by removing the low pressure TBI fuel pump from the new hanger and unclip the pre-filter. The new pump gets a rubber isolator, slides into the hanger, and a new filter sock clicks into place. This rubber fuel line is specifically formulated to be submerged in fuel and work at a higher pressure. Regular EFI fuel line won't work inside a tank. With the provided harness adapter plugged in, the pump is ready to go into the fuel tank, and it installs just like the old one came out. Now, we'll get the truck up in the air and start removing the old lines from inside the frame rail. The fuel filter comes out, then the front braided flex lines and the rear hard lines unclip and get removed. That right there, the rusty lines and the old rubber, is why these are getting replaced. I had originally planned to start our fuel system with a factory-style hardline, but the return side is too long and it would mount the regulator and filter assembly too far up on the frame rail. So instead, I'm going to make the whole thing out of this push-lock style hose. I'll start up at the fuel pump by using these O-ring to -6 AN style adapters. From there, all I have to do is push the fittings into the hose, and I got a pretty cool tool to make that happen. A little lube is applied to the fitting, and the hose gets clamped into the other end. Then the tool simply pushes the hose onto the barbed fitting, which makes push-lock hose much easier to work with. Remember, this style of hose connection requires no clamp. With it cut to length, we can push on the other barb. Back at the tank, the O-ring adapters screw onto the lines and get tightened down. The feed and return lines are fished into the frame rail and attached to the pump outlet. Then the vent and wiring are reconnected in their original location. Back underneath the truck, the quick connect adapters are attached to the hose ends. Always make sure to connect the feed and return lines to the proper ports on the filter regulator. Now we'll mark and drill a 1/4-inch hole in the frame and bolt the filter in place. The front feed lines get clicked in, and up top, the other end attaches to the back of the passenger side fuel rail. On the front, I'm attaching a small fuel pressure gauge, and a Holley crossover tube finishes up the installation of this fuel system. A quick test of the pump verifies the required pressure, and that we have no leaks.
Next, we meet the new guy.
Nice to meet you.
We're back on truck tech, almost ready to fire up the 400-horse 5.3 LS in Project RedTide. With the battery in place, we can attach the power and ground cable, connect the power and main wiring harness to the Holley computer, and finally, we'll top her off with some engine oil. Now, obviously, none of this wiring is permanently installed. I just wanted to take some time, get it thrown on there, and start the engine up just so I can make sure everything runs like it should and that we don't have any leaks. Plus, it's not like you need an excuse to hear an engine run with open headers. See if she fires. You just can't beat the sound of a V8 with a nice healthy cam in it. Oh, I love it. Can't wait to get this thing out on the road. Now, on to something completely different. Our custom drive shaft is still on order, so I asked a few friends to help move RedTide out from the lift.
Oh yeah, that's good.
This is the fastest this truck's gone in a long time.
Does it steer all right, LT?
Oh, it's awful.
Is that seat comfortable?
Should have hooked up the power steering.
All right, I think this is the first time we've had everybody from PowerNation in the same studio at once. Guys, say hello to Austin LaFour, the newest member of Truck Tech.
Hey, welcome to the PowerNation
Nice
family.
to meet you.
Board, man.
Nice to meet you. Welcome to the show, bud. Excited to be here. Definitely.
I like your hair, but you need more white in there. You'll catch up.
No, I'll
it looks
work on
good.
that.
It looks good.
Catch up.
You'll catch up.
Welcome aboard, man.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, man.
Absolutely.
So Austin, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I just showed up, get a nice introduction, you know. I am originally from south of New Orleans, a little town called Cutoff, Louisiana. Kind of grew up working on trucks, hot rods, race cars, more of metal fab, body work, paint type of stuff, gears.
That makes LT very happy.
Suspension.
I can already tell that.
Yeah, so I hear. But yeah, willing to lend a helping hand here, man, and get to work. I'm excited. One quick question. Who could give me a little advice working with this fella LT over here?
First step, don't get his accent.
Got it. So mine's is better. All right, I'll take it.
Stay away from diesels. LT, I think you got that
No, that's
covered.
bad advice.
Man,
That's
I
bad
drive a
advice?
diesel. That's not good. Okay.
42-inch tires are bigger.
All right. Got some work to do there.
If you need something, he never comes up with it.
How do I get as tall as LT? That's what I really
He
want.
comes over, wants fittings and everything, and we always come through for him. I come over and need one little zip tie, and he doesn't have it.
And don't adopt that, hey,
I feel like this is deteriorating. I don't know, guys.
they'll come over and say, hey, you got that engine running? You know, I'll be tightening main bearings, right? Hey, you got that engine running? He's putting pressure on. Don't let him put any pressure on you.
All noted.
All noted.
Definitely.
Duly noted.
Oh man, I sound like a real pleasure to work with.
LT, I'm excited, man.
I'm glad to have you.
I wouldn't listen to what any of these guys
It's been lonely by myself here,
Yeah,
so
no,
I'm
I'm-
glad to have someone to talk to.
I don't know how I'd take that one.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but we should probably get something done today. We can leave these guys at it, huh?
Absolutely. Pleasure to meet all of y'all, and it looks like me and LT got some work to do.
That's right. Well, thanks for the horsepower, guys. Appreciate it.
If you need something, we're right next door.
We're down the hallway.
We got a date with a dyno.
And
Yeah.
if you need something, we won't be here.
Next, we want to clean up the interior of the truck a little bit. So we'll get to work by first unbolting and removing the seats. But man, we gave you the hard job first day, huh?
Yeah, let's yank them out.
The seatbelt anchors, kick panels, door sills, and a few other trim panels come out. And finally, the nasty 30-year-old carpet can get tossed in the dumpster.
Since the transfer case swap, this truck no longer requires the use of a shifter assembly to access the four-wheel drive. Therefore, we're going to take it out, make a delete plate to block that off. It starts with a cartboard template using the shifter plate as a guide. It gets transferred over to some inexpensive aluminum plate, which gets trimmed on the bandsaw. Now, I could weld in a steel patch panel, but doing it this way makes the delete removable, just in case the next owner of RedTide wants to convert it back to four-wheel drive someday.
Next, freshening up your interior.
With its new lower stance and much more powerful engine, Project RedTide is going to handle the corners much better than it could when it was jacked up in the air. Now, we want to update the looks and function of the interior, so we went to Summit Racing and picked up a pair of Corbeau Baja RS reclining suspension seats. Now, normally you'd find these in an off-road style rig, but their design makes them very comfortable to use every single day. And the extra bolstering in the shoulder and hip area will keep us planted in those seats when we're slinging the truck around the corners. We also picked up a pair of mount brackets that are designed for the 88 to 98 GM full-size trucks, and they also have adjustment sliders built in. To fill in the gap between the seats and give us some extra storage, we also picked up a center console. And we'll get started by making some holes for the brackets. Depending on how your truck was equipped from the factory, you might have to drill a few holes into the floor to mount the bucket seats. Since our truck had a split bench with the longer part on the passenger side, all we have to do is drill the two inside holes into the floor. All right, man, this ought to dress it up.
Oh, definitely. This carpet's going to lay down nice in here.
To replace the faded red carpet, we went to Classic Industries and picked up a new black carpet, which comes molded to fit the floor pans of the truck.
So a nice thing about installing new carpets is they always give you excess so you can trim the fit. So we'll measure, mark, and cut, and hope you don't cut too much because it don't grow back.
It has a heel pad bonded in. It's made from top quality nylon and has sound deadening material on the back. Plus, it's 50% heavier than standard cut pile for more durability and a more luxurious feel.
Making progress.
Once all the trimming is done, we can make some holes for the fasteners to pass through. Bolt the seat brackets to the floor, reinstall all the original trim, and finally, bolt the new seats onto the sliders. We need to fill that space in between the two front seats, and a console is the perfect thing to do that because it gives you extra storage, a place to put your drink, and a spot to organize all that change you found underneath the carpet. Now, I looked around trying to find a factory center console, but they're very hard to come by in decent shape, so this is the next best thing. It's actually designed to fit in a late model Jeep, but we took some measurements and it's a perfect fit for our truck. We'll start by drilling 4 holes into the base of the console. Position it between the seats, take some measurements and center it up, and secure it to the floor using some self-drilling screws, which completes the makeover of Project RedTide's interior.
Man, LT, this interior cleaned up real nice. It's amazing what a few little cosmetic upgrades will do to transform the whole look.
And one more thing checked off the list, we got that 5.3 fired up for the first time, which is a major milestone on a project like this.
Yes, absolutely. And the list of things to do is getting short, so we're almost there. A few cosmetic upgrades to the exterior, we'll be wrapped up.
And we appreciate you guys watching. For more information on Project RedTide or any of our other builds, be sure to check out PowerNationTV.com.
Yeah, man.
You got to take care of all this for me? There's a lot of potential in this 65 C10, so we've ordered some parts and we'll pick back up with it in a couple of weeks. Now it's time to turn our attention to Project RedTide, our '88 Chevy K1500, which started out life as a 4-wheel drive pickup. Since then, we swapped the transfer case and front differential, and now it's a lowered all-wheel drive sport truck.
And that front diff we installed is a 4:10 gear ratio setup. This will give us quick acceleration off the line, but also nice cruising RPMs at that highway speed. All we need to do, since it's all-wheel drive, is make sure that rear matches the front.
So today, we're going to swap gears in that 8.5-inch 10-bolt, and along the way, we're going to install some better brakes and a sway bar up front. But we'll get started by tearing apart that rear end. Rather than just re-gear to match the front,
Got her.
we're taking this opportunity to do some upgrades along the way. We'll make the rear end stronger and improve its traction at the same time. Many people think that a 410 and a 411 are the same thing. Uh-oh, it was empty. But they have different tooth counts. You can actually order both for the 10-bolt, so make sure you pay attention to what you're getting. We grabbed all the parts that we'll need to rebuild the rear end in our K1500 from Summit Racing, and we started out with a 410-to-1 ring and pinion gear set that'll perfectly match what's in the front differential. The ring gear is going to be attached to this Detroit TrueTrack helical gear style limited slip differential, which has a perfect split in power between the rear wheels, giving maximum traction on the street. Now, in '88, there were several different options for spline counts on the 10-bolt rear end. We're going to upgrade to the stronger 30 spline, which means we need a different axle shaft to attach to it. So we grab these Mosier 30 spline 6-lug axles that are a direct fit into our 10 bolts housing. We also grabbed all the remaining parts that we'll need to complete the installation, like a forged pinion yoke with a stronger 1350 U-joint, an installation kit with all the shims, bearings, seals, and hardware that we'll need, and to strengthen the rear end just a little bit more, we grabbed a Mosier differential cover with built-in carrier cap supports. We'll get started by installing the ring gear onto the carrier.
While LT continues with gear matching the rear, I moved up front to improve this truck's stopping power. And since we've more than doubled the horsepower with our LS swap, these factory components just won't do. Summit Racing offers a few choices for brake replacements. We chose this upgraded kit that has red powder-coated single piston calipers, carbon fiber ceramic infused brake pads, and also zinc plated drilled and slotted rotors, which will ensure better cooling and also improve pad contact. During teardown, I noticed the brake line of the frame showed some wear, so I picked up some factory replacements for both sides. Body roll on these first-gen Chevys were notorious, and I'll tackle that after LT buttons up the rear.
One unique thing about the 10-bolt is the ring gear bolts are left-hand thread. A small dab of thread locker will hold them in place. They are torqued to spec, and the carrier bearings are pressed onto the carrier. Then, the new bearing races are driven into the housing. There are a few critical steps to setting up the ring and pinion, and I always start with the stock pinion shim and a setup bearing to get a baseline. The rear end gets assembled temporarily, so we can measure backlash and run a pattern check, both of which will tell us what needs to be adjusted. We're going to add 10 thousandths of shim to the pinion, press on the bearing, permanently install the pinion into the housing, and tighten the nut until proper bearing preload is reached. Then the carrier goes in, we'll measure backlash, and run a final pattern check. Now that the hard work is done, the 30-spline axles slide into place, and they're held there with the stock C-clips and the axle spacer. The retaining spacer and snap ring locks it all in place, and it gets sealed up with our new diff cover. The cap supports get preloaded, finishing up the rear end.
Next, ditch your dated grille for a modern look.
Hey, LT, you might give me a hand with this rear sway bar?
Oh, absolutely. Welcome back to Truck Tech. To keep Project RedTide level while cornering, we're adding an anti-roll or sway bar out back. It first connects to the axles with a provided bracket. We picked up this bolt-on kit from Summit Racing, and all we have to do is mark and drill a half-inch hole in the side of the frame. And the end links tie it all together.
Out front, the original sway bar is long gone, so it gets an upgrade with this 1 1/8" bar made from 4140 chrome moly, which bolts to the stock location.
One of the last steps to completing our all-wheel drive conversion is getting power from the transfer case to both differentials. And since we swapped an engine, transmission, and transfer case, none of the original links will work anymore. So we called up Tom Wood's custom drive shafts and gave him a few measurements. The rear shaft has a 32-spline yoke to match up with the NV149, and a stronger than stock 1350 style U-joint to attach to our forged yoke. Since the front shaft will be getting power all the time, we spec'd out a double cardan design which will stand up to the high-speed abuse which we have planned.
Our 88 Chevy is going to get a few cosmetic upgrades before she rolls out of here. So we went to Classic Industries to pick up a few restoration parts to help improve the look of this truck. It starts with this dual headlamp composite grille from a 98 GMC. We just prefer the look of this compared to that 88 dull chrome piece. Out back, we're ditching these dated style taillights for these LED Euro style replacements. And Classic Industries also sent us new headlamps, front corner markers, and painted side mirrors to round out our upgrades. Now, let's get started by prepping the grille. Later model GM trucks of this era had body color matched grills, so that is what we're after with RedTide. I'll mask the center section so we can keep the black and chrome intact. Then it's on to the boot, where I'll apply wax and grease remover, isopropyl alcohol for an anti-static agent, followed by a coat of duplicolor adhesion promoter. I'm mixing up some epoxy primer and catalyst designed to give our plastic parts a good foundation and fill in any imperfections. All we need is one coat. For base, we're going with a single stage paint as opposed to a base coat clear coat system. Because our truck was previously sprayed with single stage, and our goal is to come as close as we can. Single Source in Nashville, Tennessee has sent us a polyurethane Victory Red. This will provide color, strength, and shine built into one application. It mixes 6 parts base, 1 part activator, and 1 part hardener. When setting up your gun, it's always a good idea to refer to the data sheet of the product you're spraying. This will give you a good starting point for air pressure settings. I sprayed this one at about 25 psi, but at the end of the day, it all comes down to personal preference. I'm gonna give it 3 coats. I'll do a light coat on the first, followed by 2 full wet coats. There is no need to sand down any orange peel because it will better match the current texture of the truck. Also, we will polish out any imperfections later on.
While Austin was out in the paint booth finishing up the front end for Project RedTide, I had some time to build an intake tube for the 5.3 that we have swapped underneath the hood. I started out with some 4-inch aluminum elbows that we had kicking around the shop, and I TIG welded them together, leaving enough room for the electric cooling fans and the stock upper radiator hose. And the 4-inch diameter is going to flow plenty of air to feed that 400 horsepower 5.3.
So that's what you've been doing this whole time.
Oh, you know, you got to keep busy doing something. Tell you what, though, I really dig this Victory Red. It's going to pop outside.
I agree, man. What do you say we grab this thing and see how it looks?
All right. Yeah, man, I love that GMC front end. It's going to totally update this truck, bringing it into the 21st century.
That'll work for me. So this about brings us to a close to this project. A few odds and ends to wrap up. As you can see, we got that C10 rolled in the back, and we're excited to show you what we have in store for it.
Absolutely. And if you guys want any more information on Project RedTide or any of the other trucks that we build, be sure to check out PowerNationTV.com. Thanks for watching Truck Tech, and we'll see you guys next time.
Yeah, man, you want to help me throw these lights somewhere?
Absolutely. I'll tell you what, these GMC are my absolute favorite.
Lifted, now lowered. Once 4-wheel driven, now sports all-wheel drive. Today on Truck Tech, Project RedTide returns for LT's custom stainless exhaust with an exit that'll raise eyebrows. Plus, Austin shows how to get your shine on.
Hey, welcome to the shop, guys. Today we're going to be working on 2 old Chevy short bed trucks, 23 years apart and 2 totally different body styles.
Over here, we have Project RedTide, our 1988 Chevy K1500 that's been converted to all-wheel drive and lowered down to the ground. And it now identifies as a GMC, thanks to the front-end conversion that we picked up from Classic Industries. Now, mechanically, this truck's about 95% done. We've got a few odds and ends to finish up to get it roadworthy, and a custom exhaust is one of the last items that we need to build.
Now, this front grille came out really nice, and it updated the truck well. But the rest of the truck's still a little worn and faded. So I'm going to show you some paint correction techniques to help get this single-stage Victory Red shining like new. And after that, we'll tear into our newest project, this 65 C10 that we're going to nickname Project Low and Slow.
We just got in some new suspension parts that are going to lower this truck even more and tighten up the handling. So we'll start by cleaning up the frame to accept those new parts. But first, we'll get RedTide up in the air and start on that exhaust. Our exhaust system is going to start at the back of our long tube headers, which have a 3-inch V-band that's been welded on each side to make removing the exhaust system much simpler. Because we have a transfer case and a fuel tank that are mounted on the driver's side, this pipe is actually going to run down underneath the transmission pan and up into the space between the trans and the frame. There it will meet up with the other pipe from the passenger side header, and they'll both run into an X pipe that'll sit right here, which will help scavenge exhaust gas and give that 5.3 a really unique exhaust note. The pipes are going to run further back, where we'll mount the muffler in this big open space right here, which is actually where the factory mounted their muffler. Now, we could dump the tailpipe straight out the side or even dump them straight down to the ground before the axle, but we're going to continue further on, run the pipes around the shock, over the axle, and out towards the rear. Now, on this body style of truck, guys will often run the exhaust tips either out to the side or straight out the back. We have something a little bit different in mind, which we'll show you later on.
We're going to be building a 100% custom stainless steel MagnaFlow exhaust system. So we started out with a 3-inch builder's kit that has enough material between the straight and the mandrel bends that'll get us all the way from the headers to the rear bumper. We also picked up this muffler that has dual 3-inch inlets and outlets. It's made from stainless steel and it's 22 inches long, which will give our 5.3 a really aggressive sound. We also grabbed this X pipe that has a low profile that'll fit nicely in the space between the transmission and the frame rail. And to cap it all off, we grabbed a bunch of stainless steel V-bands to make all the connections. And our first task is finding a place to get this X pipe mounted up to the headers. Since the X pipe has to sit between the trans and the frame, I need to first build an offset bend. Once my cuts are made, I'll fire up the TIG and tack the two pieces to each other. Then fully weld them together using some 308 stainless filler. Then I'll attach the ring for the V-bands clamp. Looks pretty good. Let's hope it fits. Attach the pipe to the header. And then slide on the crossover. Call me crazy, but my absolute 100% favorite thing to do when working on a car or a truck is building a custom exhaust system. There's really just something kind of liberating about being able to take this thing that you've designed and thought of in your brain and turning it into a working part. It's just you, your hands, your tools, and you can transform a box of raw materials into a fully functioning exhaust system. Now, there's a couple things I always like to consider when designing and building exhaust. Number one, there's a certain amount of visual symmetry that you have to plan into the exhaust because it just looks great. And number two, you have to have it function as well. So always plan adequate clearance around things that might be sensitive to heat. So keep your exhaust far away from fuel lines, electrical wires, or any other hoses. Now, number three, you have to have ground clearance, especially on a lowered vehicle like ours. So I always keep the exhaust system above the level of the frame rail so you never will drag it on the ground or anything like that. But the most important part about building exhaust, well, it has to be removable from the vehicle. I like to keep as few joints as possible, parts that come apart, so the exhaust stays as big as possible. That kind of helps minimize leaks. But there's really nothing worse than finding out later that you have to cut your brand new exhaust in half just to service the transmission. It's really just a simple matter of planning 4 or 5 steps ahead, using your hands, your head, and your tools, and you can build something that you'll be proud of for many years to come. And that is how it's done.
Next, bringing a dull finish back to life.
While LT continues working on the exhaust, I'm going to address the finish of this truck's Victory Red paint job. I'm sure you have a daily driver or a project truck at the house that the road has taken its toll on, and it can be a chore and a half to keep it looking new. This here is the hood from Project RedTide, and if you look close, you can see scratches, imperfections, and even poor paint quality from the previous paint job. But that doesn't mean we need to repaint the entire truck to make it look new. Sonax makes high-performance car care products for the average DIYer and car care professional, which means you don't need to be an expert to get that show quality shine. They make everything from polishing to buffing pads, waxes, coatings, and even interior cleaners. We're going to begin with the Sonax Cut Max, which is an aggressive abrasive that won't damage the paint. We'll then move on to the EX0406, which will begin with a medium cut and finish out to a high gloss. We'll finish up with Profiline Polymer Net Shield to seal in that shine. I always begin any polishing project by starting with a freshly clean surface. I'm going to lay out some tape so we can eyeball the before and after. Looking at this finish, I can tell this was recently painted. Cut Max is a heavy cut abrasive that I'll pair with a red hard pad. I'm using a dual action random orbital polisher, which won't create as much heat as a rotary polisher. It's a good idea to preload your pad. 3 dime-sized dabs is all it takes to get started. I like to begin in the lowest speed setting. Basically, all I'm doing here is spreading the polish out into my working area. I work in a 2x2 foot area at a time. After it's covered, I bump the speed up to about 3 or 4 on the dial and slowly make horizontal then vertical passes while overlapping about 25% on each pass. For this stage, I apply slight pressure, but not too much. Once I cover the panel section, it gets wiped down with a microfiber so we don't cross-contaminate the abrasives. For step 2, I'll use Sonax EX0406 the exact same way as the Cut Max, but with a medium hard pad. The 0406 is a finer abrasive which can also be used as a one-step medium cut finishing polish. This stage removes any ultra-fine scratches left over by the Cut Max and gives the paint the highest level of gloss with no swirls. All of Sonax polishing compounds are water-based, meaning no dust is produced during polishing. This makes for easy cleanup and prolongs the life of your polishing pads. After about 2 passes each way, I speed the polisher up to max speed with no pressure applied. Simply keep the polisher level and allow it to do all the work. This is where the abrasives will begin to break down and fine-tune the paint for an awesome end result. Don't worry if you see your paint color transfer over to your pad. This is a single-stage paint. Therefore, that means the polisher's doing its job. Now, if you have a base coat clear coat system and you see paint color transfer, well, that means you burn through the clear, and that's not what you want. We will then seal up the paint and protect it with the Profiline Polymer Net Shield Sealant that will quickly and easily intensify the color and amplify the drip-off effect for up to 6 months. Well, there you go. Even in the small taped-off section, you can really see the results of the before and after. This just shows that with the right products and a little work, there's a shine under there just waiting to be revealed.
Next, LT plays with his new toy.
When it comes to joining stainless steel together, there are several different processes that you could use. But for the cleanest look and smallest weld bead, nothing beats a TIG. So to weld together the finished exhaust on Project RedTide, we're going to be using our Forney 220 AC/DC TIG. Now this is an inverter-based machine that plugs into 230 volts of single-phase power, and it will output anywhere between 10 and 200 amps of power, making this the perfect general-purpose machine for any fabrication projects you might run into when you're building a custom car or truck. Now, even though this will weld up to 1/4-inch thick aluminum on a single pass, we're really only going to be using a fraction of its power to weld our stainless steel exhaust. With the machine fired up, we can go over some of the options. There are 10 pre-programmed settings for each steel and aluminum, making first-time setup very simple. Just use the provided chart to make your selection, and if you want, you can store your own custom settings as well. You can control the duration of both pre- and post-weld gas flow, which is especially important on stainless steel. It also has a built-in pulse feature to help control heat input into thinner materials. The Forney 220 AC/DC comes with 12.5-foot leads, a gas flow meter, ground clamp, and of course a foot pedal to control output current. It also has high-frequency capability, which means you can have clean arc starts without having to contact the tungsten to the base material. Stainless steel is a somewhat tricky material to weld properly, as it's sensitive to heat. My rule of thumb is to keep your travel speed as fast as you can comfortably move. Quickly roll into the throttle with a pedal and get the metal just hot enough. Make your weld and then get off the heat as quick as you can. Also, you'll notice I'm running a larger number 12 cup and gas lens to keep a larger weld area shielded by the argon. And also, don't forget to let the post-flow cycle complete before moving the torch away from the weld area. On stainless exhaust pipe, I set the post-flow to 8 seconds. When I mocked up this crossover pipe underneath the truck, I actually used a MIG welder with mild steel filler to tack everything in place. Now that's a quick and easy way to get your exhaust system locked down. And when I finished welded it with a TIG, well, I could have gone right up and over those tack welds. The problem is that little bit of mild steel can actually cause the rest of this stainless steel exhaust system to rust out.
I'm using a Forney dual-sided flap wheel on the 80 grit side. I'll carefully grind down the tack welds flush with the base metal, working with as small of an area as possible to keep the finished product looking good. Then, I'll come back in and TIG weld over the gaps using the same 308 filler as the rest of the exhaust system. Then, I can reattach the crossover to the header and tack weld the other end to the X-pipe. The front half of the exhaust system is pretty much done, and I'm real happy with how it's turning out. Now, the X-pipe is mounted fairly close to the frame to clear the transmission. But if I took my two pipes and I ran straight back, the muffler actually wouldn't fit because it would be pushed over too close to the frame rail. So I made a pair of these little offset pipes that slide into the X-pipe, and it'll jog the muffler over about 2.5 inches, which is just enough room to make it fit. Now the next part that I need to figure out is get a way to hang the rear of this muffler. Now luckily there's a cross member right above where it stops, so I have a great place to attach these rubber isolators that come with the kit. Yeah, somewhere in there.
Next, can a Corvette inspire our pickup? Find out.
Progress continues on the custom exhaust for RedTide, and we're working on finishing up the tailpipe section. There are a few obstacles we need to work around, namely the passenger side shock and the rear axle. So I'll keep the pipes as high as possible and leave at least an inch of clearance between any part of the frame. My process is fairly simple. I'll just eyeball the correct angles, make a square cut on the chop saw, deburr the edges with a flap wheel and a die grinder, and when I'm happy with the fit, I'll build the tailpipe section by tack welding on one bend at a time. I told you guys we had something pretty special in mind for the exhaust exit on this truck, and here it is. I took 4 90-degree mandrel bends and I built a custom quad tip to resemble a C5 or a C6 Corvette, and we think it's going to look and sound pretty great. So the last thing we have to do to finish up this exhaust is connect the over-the-axle pipe to the tip, add a few more hangers, and we're done.
Whatever you guys are working on in your own shop, there is a chance you will eventually need to paint something, whether it be bare metal, car or truck parts, or an entire vehicle. There are many different paint systems you can choose from for your specific application. So today, we're talking paint, from single to multi-stage and what works best where. Everyone has picked up and sprayed something with a rattle can at some point. It's just about the easiest and least expensive way to get pigment on anything. Now, even though we have a professional spray booth next door, spray paint still has a place in our shop. It's a one-part system, meaning that the paint cures via air dry and no chemical reactions occur. We often use it for engine parts, interior items, and undercarriages, any surfaces that don't have direct contact with the sun. Although you can additionally spray on clear coat for extra protection. Single stage means the base and clear coat are mixed together. This was used in vehicles off the assembly line up until about 1980. Additionally, it requires the use of a catalyst to promote the curing process. We utilize single stage on Project RedTide, where our Victory Red required an activator and hardener to make it more durable and provide a high film build. Because single stage paint is a one-step process requiring no additional clear coat, it makes it more cost-effective and a quicker process altogether. Many restoration shops also use single stage to mimic and try to reproduce the old classics we all love. Lastly is a two-stage paint system. This typically means a base coat for the first and a clear coat for the second stage. Now the base coat does not provide any strength or durability, it's applied for color coverage only. The clear coat is the second stage, which is strictly applied for strength, durability, and shine. The base coat can be a one-part air drying cure, while the clear coat is a two-part requiring a hardener or catalyst for the curing process. Base coat clear coat systems are often used especially when spraying metallics. This allows you to spray the base properly to ensure the metal flakes stand up and eliminate blotching. This one can be one of the more labor-intensive and expensive processes. As you could tell, there are many different paint systems out there, Each one has its own pros and cons, but all work great when applied correctly. So when choosing the right paint for your project, refer to your local automotive paint supplier and they'll be happy to point you in the right direction. So hopefully all this will help you to begin your research in choosing which process will best suit your needs. This was a pretty hot debated topic on the exit strategy of the exhaust, but if you ask me, I think all your long hours paid off, and that about wraps up this project.
Absolutely. You know, the quad tip thing is kind of love it or hate it, but I just think it looks like it belongs. So we started off with a four-wheel drive truck, and then we lowered it down to the ground. We did an engine and transmission swap, and finally we converted RedTide to all-wheel drive. So really the last thing that we have to do is fire it up and listen to that exhaust. Man, hit it. Beautiful. Rev it up a couple times. You just can't beat the sound of a healthy cammed American V8.
Yeah, next time you see this truck, it might be on some terrain you may not expect and probably even get a little dirty.
That's for sure. For more information on Project RedTide or any of the other trucks that we build, check us out at PowerNationTV.com. Thanks for watching Truck Tech, and we'll catch you next time.
It's Judgment Day for Project RedTide. And where else but a rallycross track would LT and Austin run this all-wheel drive convert through its paces?
We're gonna do some slinging, some sliding, and some ultra-fast riding.
Plus, Low and Slow reveals its bones.
After months of searching, we just picked up our newest project truck, this 1965 Chevrolet C10 short box fleet side straight out of Marshall, Texas. The million-dollar question is, what direction are we going to take with the build of this truck? Because there are a lot of different options. We already know we're not going to be messing with the exterior. Since it already looks perfect in our opinion, there's no need to change anything. However, the powertrain and suspension, those areas could certainly use some attention.
Now, we nicknamed this truck Project Low and Slow, and to help it live up to that, there are a few ways we can go about it. A common method is to replace these steel coil springs with an airbag suspension. This will give you a nice adjustable ride height for when you really want to slam those rockers on the ground when parked. All you have to do is push the button when you're ready to ride.
Now, the other thing we could do would be install a coilover suspension system. Now, this won't be adjustable, but it'll greatly improve the suspension geometry and the handling of this classic American pickup.
Also, we want to keep the rustic appearance on the outside. We don't want to touch it, but we do want the underneath to look nice and clean. So the first thing we need to do is get this frame ripped out, get it prepped for a coat.
Pull it back a little.
Coming back.
Think this car will hold it?
We're gonna find out. That'll work.
Oh yeah, we're golden.
All right, bro, let's check this thing out.
I guess the big question is, how's the frame look?
Man, not bad at first glance. I mean, a little bit of pitting here and there, nothing we didn't really expect from a 50-some-odd-year-old truck.
Well, speaking of 50-some years old, still wearing a chambered muffler, complete with no hanger and exhaust leaks.
I like it, I like it.
All right, so I guess what, the next step is get the cab undone?
Yeah, let's find these body bolts and yank it out.
All right.
Go ahead.
Ah, there we go.
It's just a simple matter of removing the battery, getting the cooling system drained, and the radiator removed. I'll disconnect the brake line, the shift linkage at the column, and remove a few wires. So very nice. Then we'll get the lift arms in place and get this crusty old cab out of here.
So if you're ever at home by yourself on the holidays and you see a couple guys outside carrying these, you're probably about to have a whole lot of fun.
What, you trying to try out for the Wet Bandits?
So you can really learn a lot about the history of a pickup truck just by yanking off the body and taking a look at the frame. One thing I've learned is this truck was probably used really hard on a farm or a ranch. Now check out some of the localized damage in this area right here. Normally guys will come and put a tow hook right here. So this truck was probably stuck in the mud. Buddy came along with his tractor, hooked up a chain and just gave it a real hard yank and caused some pretty good damage right here, but nothing we can't fix. Same thing over here. There's a couple of small stress cracks that have probably just developed from years and years of hard use and vibration.
Yeah, man. Also, check out the size of this transmission.
That is tiny.
Super small.
All right, well, let's get this thing out of here, get that cab off the lift.
Let's have at it.
We've got a great looking classic project truck over there, and right now it's a little bit useless since it won't be driving anywhere for quite a while. And we've been teasing you guys for some time now about which direction we're going to take with this build. And right now, we're going to tell you the plan. We're going to lower this truck with a QA1 coilover conversion system that'll have parts for both the rear and the front. It comes with lower and upper control arms and, of course, coilover shocks that'll be mounted on all four corners that'll bring this truck down 4 inches in the front and 6 inches in the rear, which, in our opinion, is the perfect height for a mid-60s Chevy C10.
Absolutely. And while you were gathering suspension components, I was working on brakes and steering. Now, as you could tell with the cab off on this truck, there's still a lot of OEM components. And some of that are these old drum brakes. Now, we're not going to keep this power plant. We know we're going to do something high performance. Even though we won't go too crazy, we still want to stop. So these got to go. We went over to Summit Racing and picked up this big brake kit. This will allow for better cooling and quicker stopping. In order to get that bolted on, had to get these spindles too.
All right, well, the way I see it, we've got two different choices. We could get dirty, we could bolt on some of these parts on that frame, or what I think is a better option, we got Project RedTide over here. It's got a full tank of gas and I've got the keys. Why don't we go for a drive?
I like that plan.
Next, RedTide goes rallycrossing.
When it comes to finding a place to take our project trucks when done, we like to mix it up every now and then.
The past few seasons, we've been to the road course, the drag strip, autocross, and of course we logged some miles on the local roads.
But since this truck is special with its all-wheel drive conversion, we wanted to find a place we could test out its capability and traction.
So we came out here where there's lots of loose gravel, wide open spaces, and some areas where we can get this truck to slide around a little bit. We're going to try our hands at rallycross. Low buck beaters to full custom tube chassis, Rallycross is a full-on dirt racing series put on by the Sports Car Club of America.
And to put Project RedTide through its paces, we're at Holly Tree Off-Road Park, about 35 miles outside of Huntsville, Alabama.
It's an 800-acre playground for dirt bikes, ATVs, rock crawlers, and of course, monthly rally racing.
A rallycross course is actually a timed course, and so there's a start, there's a finish. It is a curvy course with cones that are delineated by pointers that tell you which way to go. If you hit a cone, it costs you 2 seconds of additional time. If you go around the wrong side of a cone, it's a 10-second additional penalty. So for today, because of the fact that this is truck tech, and we figured you're bringing a truck, we thought we'd open the course up a bit. So normally the course may have some gotchas where you come over a crest and suddenly there's a slight tight turn. Well, in this case, I've opened up the course to make it more open, more friendly, and easier to follow for newbies, people who haven't done this before, to give you a chance.
So the first thing we're going to do is a parade lap, basically just to get a feel for the course and know what we're getting into. You know, Austin, maybe we need to change the name of the show from Truck Tech to like Rally Tech.
Yeah, whatever we want, really.
I'm feeling this.
So we're going to start out nice and easy here and just pull out. And you're going to line yourself up, and now we're looking at the next cone. And so we're going to drive around the outside of those two out here. And again, keeping your eyes up, looking at the lineup of the cones. You see the line we have to go through? And we're coming out here. Now you get a little view of the course a little faster. A little this way, a little this way. And now we're going to go left to these two. Notice they're both pointers this way. And then we go through the little dip. And then we're going to come up here. Watch this dip here on your suspension so you don't bottom, okay? And then here you might have to brake a little. Kick it in, come around this side. Again, looking ahead around that corner, keeping your eyes ahead. See that? A little bit of slide there.
On this one, I want to get over by this cone in the grass. Stay tight, nice and easy, okay? And through here, you can see, you can really rock through here.
Oh yeah.
This will be easy. And on this one, we cut you way up over here because if you get wide, look what's waiting for you.
Yeah.
There's a big old mud hole. That will take you out.
One of us will find it.
You'll be cleaning that truck for quite a while.
Yeah.
And then this one, and we're gonna just nice and easy around. That look like fun?
Does that look
This is awesome.
Yeah, you haven't had the fun part yet. And then nice through here. Now here we got a little bit of a surprise. Watch that cone right there when you're throttling, see? And then this little finish to the finish. There you go, how's that?
I love it.
Yep.
And you're just starting to feel the fun.
Next, our Chevy goes a slipping and a sliding.
All right, so we got a couple of prepared rally cars that are going to kind of show us the ropes and show us what it looks like doing a proper lap. And I'm excited to see what they have.
Absolutely. We did a parade lap to get the lay, but we're gonna see what these guys can do turning it up a bit.
All right, I'm excited. One thing we learned right away, anyone can try their hand at slinging a car or truck around a rallycross track, even if your vehicle is bone stock. The course is typically set in a big open field where you don't have to worry about hitting trees or going off a cliff.
One car goes at a time, and you get a small running start. Leon Drake is one of our hosts. He's a 3-time Rallycross national champion in his 1990 Honda CRX.
Oh, this is an adrenaline thrill like nothing else. I mean, it's short term at a time, but it's a lot longer than a drag race, obviously. It's super fun because of the sliding around. Yes, I've been on 2 wheels, and I've also personally been to nationals. I've won 3 national championships. Charles right here today has also won 3 national championships, so we are real addicts, you could say. Types of vehicles we get, and we get a lot of different things, is the most popular meat and potatoes is going to be Subaru. If you have a Subaru and you're not doing this, you need an intervention because this is great fun. And Subarus are the base vehicle. We also have Evos and other all-wheel drives, a Honda all-wheel drive wagons. They're pretty good. Miatas do great in the rear-wheel drive classes. I've got people running station wagons. I've seen Corvettes at the Nationals, Mercury Marauder, Porsches, almost anything. It's just that it can't be taller than it is wide. So a vehicle has to be, by the rules, no taller than it is wide for safety concerns. So other than that, pretty much anything goes, and we get Volvos and cars that people are going to toss away, and they bring them out and just have a great time with them. Rallycross does not allow jumps on the courses, and we don't want to damage people's cars. So we groom the course out here at Holly Tree so that we don't damage the cars. If you break a person's car, they probably won't be back. So these courses are made to be reasonably smooth, but very fast. You slide a lot. If you like to drift, boy, this is your game. There's a lot of style points to be had out there. You can slide around and you get lots of style points, but it isn't going to make you fast. When you see the times, it'll hurt you. Even a little CRX, you're going to be surprised.
It's the most exhilarating feeling you'll ever have. It has a euphoric feeling that you can't recreate. Once you leave the start line, past the first cone, you feel that your heart races, you grip the steering wheel harder, and you're just waiting for the response from the car.
As soon as you take off from the start line, you definitely get the adrenaline pumping. You come around the first corner, probably going 20, 30 miles an hour. It's just a great rush. The course is extremely technical in some spots, but there's definitely room for speed. So I'm really interested to see how these guys work it.
Bro, so these dudes are making some pretty quick laps. Tell me what you think about that.
Well, depending on the car, it looks like they're running somewhere between a high 60 and a low 70-second lap. But these are some professional drivers, unlike us, and they have a very well-prepared car. So I really don't know what to expect when it comes to old RedTide.
I'm feeling, hey, under 100, that's a success for us.
All right, well, here's the deal. 2 laps each, and we'll add the times up.
Let's feel her out first, but I like it.
All right, man. See what she'll do.
Let's check it out. Now remember, them cones are pointing a certain way.
Yeah, what side of the cone am I supposed to be on again?
Left. If it points left, go left. I think if it points right, go right.
So pretty much everything he told us has gone out the window.
I forgot everything already. I tell you what, she's handling pretty good, man.
Was it supposed to be an easy lap?
Better hold on to something.
Yeah, buddy.
Good thing we put that center console right there.
Hey, no cones yet either.
Yet, it ain't over. It's all a little wet.
Oh,
you about to eat one.
Oh no, we slid around it. Yeah. Woo. Man. All right, that was an easy lap. Hey, look, 71. All right, well, that was supposed to be an easy lap, and we didn't really take it super easy, but it looks like we did a 71.9.
I don't even think you hit a cone, which I don't know how you did.
We'll have to double check.
Man.
I think we got one towards the end, but I am hooked. We are going to build another rally truck in the future. That's almost a promise.
You set me up for failure.
Let's do it again.
Ready, amigo.
We're ready. Trip, there we go. We couldn't be happier with how RedTide handles the cones and curves. Yeah, okay, so we totally missed that one.
Missed that one.
This is one amazing all-wheel drive truck. We built it in the same spirit as the early 90s GMC Cyclone and Typhoon. Are you doing okay over there?
I'm fine, don't worry about me, buddy. Just hanging on here.
Oh.
We may have a little rubbing action. Not really sure.
I heard something. Oh, that does not like.
Well, you might want to. Yeah, maybe stop. Let's check this out.
We might have broke something.
Yeah, let's check it out. Something fixable, I'm sure.
See anything?
We broke a front CV shaft.
Oh, really?
Yep, this it's completely ripped out.
Is it?
Yep. We could cut the shaft, tie it up, and just leave it bolted through.
Yeah.
The wheel bearing to still operate.
Yeah, that may f up the diff though. Like guys will pull the front drive shaft to do like a 9-run, fuck up the transfer case.
Well, because of no load.
Yeah, because the viscous coupler needs a load. All right, so second lap in. We were supposed to take it easy. We didn't take it super easy. We heard a loud clunk coming from the front end.
These things happen.
These things happen. We pulled over halfway through the lap. We took a look underneath the hood, and it turns out one of the CV axles that's on the passenger side of the truck actually kind of broke. So we're gonna look and see if maybe there's some way we can patch this thing together and keep having some fun, but sometimes you break, sometimes you have fun.
Just a little clunkety clank here and there.
Next, the competition heats up.
Just a little clunkety clank here and there.
With RedTide dead on the dirt with a broken CV shaft, we just thought about pulling it out and continuing on. But to do that, we'd risk burning up the transfer case. Instead,
we gonna hop in that Subaru or I'm a school LT all the way around, sliding down. I must say, this is the first time this old boy ever hopped in a Subaru. Little bitty car here, not used to that. I'm used to driving that old truck, you know? But hey, I gotta admit, it was fun. You'd ship that thing and get around them corners and pretty much keep that pedal to the floor.
all right, man, not bad for your first run out there on this track ever. You got a 73.2.
Dude, not terrible, right?
No, man, but you know what? You better go up there and hit it
Oh,
hard.
absolutely, I'm gonna smoke you. Nah, this fine little blueberry handle, a little wonky at first. You get oversteer, and then you correct steer, and then you back oversteer. Next thing you know, you're in the grass and hitting cones and going around the cones. But I gotta say, I got the hang of it. My first round, I wanna say I beat LT's time. Just saying.
All right, man.
Good luck, man.
We're gonna do this.
3, 2, 1, go.
I will say, with a little bit of beginner's luck and a completely functioning car, Austin was able to beat my lap time his second time around.
but I think we can do a little bit better. The handling of this all-wheel drive Subaru is actually quite a bit different from our full-size all-wheel drive truck. It tends to push a lot more through the corners, requiring just a little dab of brakes to get the front end to turn in and slide where you want it to go. I don't know, man, it felt a little wiggly.
Not there yet, buddy. 70.27.
Oh, 70.2, we'll work on it. It's nice to drive the Subaru with a manual transmission because you'll just leave it in second gear and it'll stay there, where the automatic transmission on our pickup is constantly hunting back and forth to find the right gear. This is actually not my first time in a Subaru, but I always enjoy when I get behind the wheel of a 4-cylinder turbocharged Japanese car. All right, Austin, so I have to admit, I did get a little bit more seat time than you today.
A little bit.
But you did really good for only having 2 runs. But come on, go ahead and tell them what was my best time.
68.3.
But you know what? It's all in good fun. We had a blast today. I do wish Project RedTide would have stood up just a little bit better, but that's okay. It's a pretty minor fix. But we have to give a special thanks to the guys from Prasad Parts in Athens, Alabama for loaning us this 02 WRX that we beat on for the afternoon.
Yeah, they helped us out a bunch. And for more information on today's show, visit PowerNationTV.com. And since you won, maybe you fix it.
Hey, I got some wrenches.